Hey guys, it's Annie, and today's video, I wanted to make this because I think it's important to sometimes talk about these kinds of things. And yes, this is a variety channel. I make a ton of different kinds of videos, and I did a poll recently. A lot of you guys actually like my testing weird products videos, and I definitely am still gonna do those, don't worry. But the videos that I feel like I get the most out of are ones that I can open up and like connect with other people and relate to other people and, you know, share things that are personal to me, because honestly, these things are actually very hard for me to talk about. I'm speaking to a camera right now. This is what makes it slightly easier. I don't talk about these things or serious subjects to people in my day-to-day life. I don't talk about these things to my parents, rarely to my friends. It takes a certain type of person for me to open up to. So even though I'm just opening up technically to a camera right now, because I don't verbalize how I feel ever, it gets really overwhelming and emotional. So I might get emotional in this video, I don't know. And it's not because I'm currently sad or depressed, it's because, like I said, it's just very overwhelming to verbalize the things that I don't talk about to other people. Also, if you relate to anything in this video or just want to be supportive, really when you do click the thumbs up button, it actually helps my video get pushed out there. And my whole purpose of sharing these vulnerable subjects is to connect, like I said, to connect, hopefully help people, you know, realize they're not alone. Because you see other videos where I'm happy, and you see on my Instagram where I'm happy, it's because I am happy. I just want you to know that I wasn't always there. And if you want me to make a video on how I changed my life around, let me know in the comments. I will totally follow this video up with that if you want me to share. But this video in particular is about the more negative, dark side of my mind, so maybe you can understand and like really see the change that I've gone through to get to here. I want to start off by saying I have ADHD. I did not know that growing up. One of the main things about ADHD is you have an overactive mind. And with having an overactive mind, that's actually one of the symptoms of anxiety and depression. Well, mostly anxiety, but you overthink things. And people who have ADHD, the majority of time, have another mental health type of situation that goes along with it, whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever it might be. And now we're getting into the part that I really don't tell a lot of people about how my brain works and the thoughts I've had throughout my life. You know how some people, if they feel depressed, it's like they feel suicidal? I have the exact opposite thing happen to me. I get depressed and in these depressive episodes because I think about that one day I'm gonna die, and that terrifies me. Some mornings I wake up, not all the time, but sometimes for a stretch of weeks even, my first thought that I wake up with in the morning is, I'm gonna die, or my parents are gonna die, or my grandparents are gonna die. And it's not like I think that they're gonna die right now, it's just the thought that someday I'm going to die. Someday I'm not gonna have my parents, my grandparents are gonna be gone. Like, I think about death probably more than your average person, and not in like a, oh, I'm suicidal. I think about it in a, I'm terrified to die kind of way. It sucks because my one biggest fear is to die, and my one biggest fear is something that is going to happen to me. My biggest fear is going to happen whether I like it or not. Some people, their biggest fear is, you know, I don't know, failure or dying in a fire. Mine's just in general dying. Not everyone who's afraid of heights is going to fall to their death. My biggest fear is death in general, and that's absolutely going to happen, and that terrifies me. I feel like those kind of thoughts started out when I was young too, and I don't think it was automatically like me being little thinking I'm gonna die. But I do remember being younger in my childhood bedroom, waking up in the morning thinking, this isn't gonna be my life one day. One day I'm gonna have to grow up and not live with my parents anymore. And I was always terrified of growing up. My whole life I've always said, especially when I was, you know, younger, even through high school, I always said, I just wanna be like 4 years old, where I can just be a kid and I can live with my parents. Like if I could reverse time to when I was 4, freeze it and live out forever being 4, living with my parents and family, that's the way I wish I could live. I've always been so attached to being a child and my childhood, and I never wanted to grow up. And I think that's partially why when I got in my 20s, I had a big depressive episode, because that's another thing. I never wanted to grow up. That's something that, again, is definitely going to happen. And just like that definitely did happen, and now I am grown up, and that fear that I had of one day I'm not going to live with my parents, it's here. And yes, things can be great sometimes. Usually things are great now. But it happened regardless. That fear that I had happened. And just like that fear eventually did happen, my fear of death is eventually going to happen. And like I said, I'll wake up in the mornings and automatically think like, my parents are getting older. They're in their 60s now. This is where I get emotional. Because my parents are like the most important people in my life. And I'm like, they're gonna die sooner than I do, obviously. There's gonna be a point where I don't have them. And keep it together. And like I said, I don't think like this every day, but the days that I wake up and that's the first thing that pops into my head, I'm gonna die, or my parents are gonna die, or my grandparents are gonna die, like that really lowers my mood and really ruins my day. And like I said, sometimes it's a stretch of time where I get these thoughts every morning, but sometimes it's months and months and months and I don't think like that. And I can't control it. Even when we were just in Hawaii, we were staying at a resort that I stayed at when I was 12 years old, so 16 years ago. And as we were leaving, I was thinking like, wow, what if we don't come back here for another 16 years? And then I think, wait, my mom's about to be 66. In 16 years, she is going to be either very old or not around. And thinking back, like, that doesn't even seem that long ago. Like, I vividly remember my first trip to that resort. In 16 years, like, I'm going to be in my 40s. Like, most people get it. Most people get excited. I do get excited for the future, but most people get excited for their future life and their kids and all this stuff. And I'm just like, when that happens, that's closer to them being gone. I knew I'd probably get emotional. Sorry, guys. Whew, like I said, I don't verbalize these thoughts, so it's kind of intense. And I don't verbalize these thoughts because I don't like to get emotional very often. So, yeah, just overwhelming. Yeah, I'm 28 now. In 16 years, I'll be in my 40s. In 16 years, my mom will be in her 80s. My grandparents will be gone. I think it's important to talk about these kinds of things because we don't, and I don't. And it's therapeutic to talk about because I hold it in. It's hard to talk face to face with people about this, but I'm talking to a camera right now. My grandparents are in their 80s right now, and every time I go home to visit them, instead of thinking like, oh yay, I get to see my grandparents, I think, okay, so they're in their 80s. I go home 3 to 4 times a year. That means over the next, hopefully several years, I don't know how long they have, I only have a handful more times to see them. Every time I visit them, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I like hold on to my grandma and think like it's getting closer and closer to her being gone. And that's really hard. And I think the same way about my dog. I got him when I was in high school and he's getting older and I love my dog. So every time I go home, I'm thinking like I have a handful of times more to spend with him. And like, that's just where my mind goes. Instead of being like, yay, I'm just like holding on, like waiting for the time to run out. Just like before how I said my biggest fear of growing up happened. I can't say that was my biggest fear. It's something that I was sad about. But just like that came to reality, all of these other fears are going to come to reality. My grandparents are going to die. My parents are going to die. My dog's going to die. I'm going to die. As sad as it sounds, like you're going to die. Everyone we know is going to die. My biggest fear happens to every single person. I don't like change. I've been afraid of change. And change is like the most natural thing. It's not that I don't like change, like, you know, I'm excited for a lot of things in my life. Like I'm excited to upgrade my apartment and I'm excited for all these little things, but like loss. Every person who has ever existed has died. Every person who is alive right now is going to die. A baby that is being born right now, they're gonna die. Everyone who hasn't been born yet and in the future, everyone's gonna die. And that is my biggest fear. And I know some people will be like, God and Jesus. And like, I grew up going to church and that never soothed these fears. I don't know if it's just part of having ADHD and an overactive mind, you know, being paired with anxiety, depression, but that's just how my mind works. And it's more than just the death thing. Like, I'll wake up sometimes and feel overwhelmed by the size of the universe, or going out and looking at the stars. Some people go outside, look up at the stars and think like, oh, it's the sky, it's beautiful. I look up at the stars and I feel so overwhelmed because I'm like, we are literally a speck of dust in all the universe and all of existence. We are so insignificant compared to the amount of space out there. Like, we get so consumed by our lives and these things that feel so huge, but in reality, we're a speck of dust. But at the same time, I do think we are very important and special and like magical, and we can make things happen and it's great. But I heard in a podcast the other day, it's like, we are important, but we're not. Like, we're important, but we're also not important, and we're really insignificant. I just get overwhelmed, I guess. Another symptom of depression is being tired all the time. I was always tired. I've recently found a lot more energy in the last few years. I mean, besides when I was in school and had to get up, and I was exhausted all the time at school. But besides from that, I would sleep until noon or later every single day up until a few years ago. My room was a complete disaster all the time. A lot of people you find that are depressed often have clutter and, you know, are unorganized, especially if you have ADHD. That's another thing with that. But like, I just in the last few years changed things around. And you know, there are so many other parts to this as well. Some of the parts I like to consider circumstantial depression, like certain circumstances and events would cause me to fall into depression, which could sometimes last for a while. My thoughts with the death and all that overwhelming stuff, those were things that I couldn't or hadn't learned to control, and they still happen to this day. Like the other morning it happened where I just woke up at like 5 a.m. thinking like, wow, my parents are gonna die, I'm gonna die, everyone's gonna die. But before that, it hadn't happened for months. So that's just my depression. The circumstantial depression were things that I put myself into that made it difficult in life. It's really therapeutic to help other people, but I think I took it too far growing up. Like, you should be there for people and understand and love others. But I always, for my whole life, wanted to fix people. And it's great too, but I have some very unlikely friends that you wouldn't expect, because I was always like, woo, bubbly. I feel like I'm such a contradiction because I had all this anxiety. I even had social anxiety with strangers, but I was also really perky and yay. Like, people used to say that I was like a real life Disney Channel character because I was, you know, bubbly. But I would befriend people. Like, I have friends from my past who have felonies and had been to prison multiple times. I have friends who were ex-drug addicts, like meth and heroin. Or I even have people that I would befriend because they were suicidal and I wanted them to not feel like people didn't care. I just always wanted to fix people and show people their potential. But there's a line that you cross if you get too emotionally attached and invested in their life, and that led to some toxic relationships where I just wanted to help and fix particularly one person, which happened in my 20s, and that led to a long stretch of depression. It was because I was in a toxic relationship, wanted to help fix him, but a person will not be fixed until they want to improve themselves. You can't make someone change, and luckily they got to a point where they wanted to change for themselves, and that's great. But in between that time, I was torn down, and that's when I gained all that weight and had the depression. Like the videos that I made about weight gain, that was from that. It was my decision to put myself and get attached and connected to someone who I couldn't fix. They had to fix themselves. Did that make sense? So there were times like that where I just wanted to help people and it just drug me down. I'm putting this all out there because these are all the bad parts of my life. Not going fully into detail on a lot of them, but people will look at my life and think like, oh, she grew up with, you know, family that cares about her, and yes, I did, and you know, she was a cheerleader and had friends and all this stuff, and I did, and I appreciate it. I've had some amazing times in my life, but that doesn't take away the fact that I've had all of these overwhelming thoughts and feelings and situations and toxic things and loss and all of it. We all have our own different ways of thinking and doing things, and it affects people differently, and I am a very sensitive person, and I think it's also important not to be hardened by the hard situations in life, because if you become hardened and hurt and hateful, that numbs you, and who wants to go through life numb? Everything I've gone through has just taught me that I can get through anything. You know, I do still have my fear of people dying and losing people and all of that, but you know, I'm learning that I just need to enjoy the time that I do have and make the most of it. And I will go over that, how I got into a different mindset, in another video. Just let me know if you want to see that video. It'll be basically how I switched my mindset, how I, you know, kind of conquer depression and anxiety, and tips like that that have genuinely helped me. Other than opening up about the dark side of my mind, I am happy. I have switched my mindset. I have began to transform my life, and I want to help people who are wanting help with how to do that and how to get out of that negative, depressive mindset. So if you want to see that, let me know. Anyway, I should probably wrap this up, but I hope you connected with this video, and I will see you soon with a new one. Bye guys.